Build your work where no one's watching. Sharpen your craft in private, then step into the light and let the world be stunned. The quiet strategy. Why silence is not submission there. Notice a confusion in our moment. People equate silence with passivity, with defeat. But silence is often the most strategic posture a person can take. Consider soldiers before an ambush. They do not shout their plans. They prepare in the hush of shadow. Consider composers before performance. They do not announce mastery. They practice alone. Silence is not the absence of action. It is the economy of force. It conserves attention, concentrates intention, and shields the work from premature consumption. Why does silence work? First, it prevents the leakage of energy. Every time we narrate a project, every status update, every half-formed boast, a portion of creative energy escapes. Validation becomes a substitute for completion. The private worker learns to redirect that energy back into the craft. Second, silence grants the time necessary for depth. Real transformation rarely fits into a soundbite. It involves iterative failure, patient revision, and long arcs of learning. These processes demand a place outside public measurement, a laboratory of solitude. Silence also preserves surprise. Surprise is a persuasion tool more refined than argument. When you reveal the fruits of concentrated labor at a moment of maximal clarity, not as a plea but as proof, the reaction transforms from polite applause to astonishment. The astonishment is not vanity. It is leverage. It resets expectations, rewrites narratives, and creates the psychological space for new authority to be recognized. Equally important is the internal discipline cultivated by silence. To withhold a story you could tell requires steadiness. It teaches you to be content with the inner witness rather than the chorus of external approbation. This inner witness becomes your most reliable audience. When your motives are not managed by metrics and likes, your work aligns with an intrinsic standard. That standard is harder to shake and more potent than transient praise. Silence is not merely defensive, it is creative. In the hush, associations form that friction and noise would otherwise disrupt. The mind connects disparate materials into pattern. You must value this interior synergy. Without it, production tends toward imitation because imitation is safe within the crowd. The private worker is free to be original because originality is risky and requires inner sanctuary. Finally, silence cultivates moral clarity. Many of our public declarations are attempts to buy identity. The private life avoids that market. It demands that your identity be demonstrated by craft, not claimed by proclamation. The world will always prefer the loud. The rare person who holds silence as strategy stands apart because their work resists negotiation. They become exemplars not by volume but by the gravity of their output. Remember, choosing silence is choosing the long play. It is a refusal to be hurried by opinion polls and an embrace of the slow processes that build real power. Silence is a tactic for those who mean to create consequence, not merely to create noise. If you want to matter, practice the art of quiet preparation. It is where ordinary effort becomes extraordinary result. Mastery is not a public spectacle. It is a workshop ritual. Think of a craftsman at his bench. No cameras, no commentary, just iterative, humble interaction with material. The craftsman returns day after day, performs small corrections file after file until the piece becomes inevitable. Solitude is the silent workshop where the raw material of talent becomes shaped by sweat and attention. To build in private, you need a framework. First, a defined space and time where experimentation is the rule and judgment is bracketed. Without such a container, private work becomes sporadic and easily surrendered. Second, a method of small measurable experiments. Mastery biography is not a succession of grand efforts, but a sequence of micro-commitments. 1,000 disciplined mornings, 100 rehearse and fail cycles, a dozen iterated prototypes. These small actions compound into competency the same way small deposits grow into capital. Third, solitude requires cultivating tools of attention. The modern world is engineered for distraction. Building in private is an act of resistance. Use rituals that signal the start and end of workshop time. A particular seat, a cup, a tracking sheet. The ritualistic gestures help the nervous system shift from consumption to production. Over time, the body learns the difference. Entering the chair becomes a cue for creative mode. Fourth, solitude benefits from a journal of practice. Documentation is not merely for accountability. It is the map of progress. When you review the journal months later, you see patterns and inflection points invisible in the heat of daily effort. This reflective scaffolding turns random trial into a pedagogy of craft. It makes hidden growth legible to you, even if not legible to others. Fifth, the quiet workshop is a fertile place for integrative thinking. When the noise abates, analogies form, problems solved in one domain become solutions in another. The solitude that allows cross-pollination creates originality. In public, you are pressured into simple narratives. In private, complexity is welcomed. Finally, solitude is not loneliness when rightly organized. It is company with the work. The workshop becomes a covenant. You promise attention to the material, and the material promises response through refinement. That covenant, kept over years, yields work that is not merely competent but authoritative. Build so well in private that the moment you reveal your work, the world recognizes not acclaim but evidence. We live in an age that rewards announcement. Platforms are built to monetize the moment of revelation, the teaser, the pre-launch, the drip of unfinished progress. Instead of finishing, we serialize. The urge to announce feels like progress because it produces immediate dopamine, but it often sabotages the slow arc of mastery. Resisting that urge is an ethical and strategic discipline. First, observe the psychology of announcement. We narrate to be seen, to be affirmed. Early announcement substitutes celebration for completion. Every revealed fragment invites critique, opinion, and often premature consumption. The fragments of a work released before it is ready may define it in the public mind, freezing it in a half-formed state. To retain the right to revise, you must keep sufficient work out of public circulation until the piece can speak fully for itself. Second, practice a readiness litmus test. Ask, if this were revealed now, would it add to the world or distract? If the honest answer is that it would be more about my narrative than the product's usefulness, delay. Announce only when the work's readiness serves others, not your insecurity. This criterion pushes you to make the reveal about value rather than vanity. Third, learn the art of staged revelation. There is a difference between serializing your process for the sake of attention and strategizing for incremental impact. Staged revelation is patient and purposeful. It prepares certain audiences, creates necessary allies, and allows you to test reception without giving away the core. But the core moment, was the launch of real consequence, remains reserved for completeness. Fourth, cultivate private validation systems. Instead of broadcasting to strangers, present your drafts to careful peers, those who understand the craft and can offer critique that tightens rather than scatters. The right feedback loops accelerate refinement. They spare you the noise of public opinion and replace it with disciplined correction. Fifth, train your nervous system. The compulsion to announce is biologically reinforced. When you resist repeatedly, you weaken the reflex and strengthen sustained attention. It becomes easier to sit with unlaunched excellence. Practice this with small projects. Finish something in private and keep it private for a designated time. Observe what withholding does to the depth and clarity of the work. Finally, appreciate the payoff. Timing matters. A well-chosen moment of reveal can reframe your career, rewrite narratives, and command respect. But reveal after readiness, not as a ritual for applause. Reveal to deliver impact. Reserve revelation as a moral act. You present only when the work is ready to do its work. Do not trade your masterpiece for early applause. Wait, craft, and let the reveal do the convincing. The mathematics of small acts power accumulates where attention compounds. The mathematics of small acts is simple. Incrementally repeated behavior yields exponential capacity. If you write one focused page a day, a year later you have a manuscript. If you train 30 minutes a day, a year later you are transformed. The private worker understands that accumulation prefers discretion over declaration. Begin with the idea of marginal gains. Identify micro-practices that, compounded, lead to mastery. These are not dramatic changes, but precise calibrations. 5 minutes of deliberate practice, one clarified piece of feedback per session, a single adjustment to form. Marginal gains compound because each small improvement amplifies the next. The system becomes more efficient, more sensitive, more powerful. Next, adopt records. Compound interest requires an account. Track your tiny wins. A ledger of small improvements prevents the illusion that nothing is happening. It produces a narrative of progress that fuels perseverance. The private person who records daily practice sidesteps the desperation of intermittent reward and engages in a steady loop of reinforcement. Third, Structure feedback. Small acts without correction can calcify into bad habits. The mathematics works only with honest adjustment. The workshop demands short cycles, try, measure, correct. This approach prevents the gambler's fallacy of random persistence and replaces it with disciplined iteration. Fourth, imagine compound attention as a shield. The quiet long-term builder can withstand setbacks because the reserves accumulated privately provide resilience. When public crises arrive, the private capital of craft and competence prevents panic and improvisational compromise. This is the psychological payoff of compounding: steadiness under pressure. Fifth, honor the latency. Exponential curves are invisible in the beginning. The initial months of private practice feel slow and unrewarding. This is the test of conviction. The market values novelty and hates patience. Resist the market's tempo. The reward for patient compounding is not immediate social notice but eventual inevitability. Your competence will outpace trend and catch the world off guard. Finally, celebrate the small. To neglect minor progress is to starve the long-term engine. Ritualize acknowledgement. Over time, the compound of small acts not only produces results but rewires identity. You stop thinking, "I am someone who starts," and begin thinking, "I am someone who finishes." Do the small things with unshakable fidelity. Their sum becomes the force that surprises the marketplace. There is a kind of influence that needs no marketing. It is the authority of someone whose competence has been rehearsed in private until their action reads like verdict. Invisible authority does not rely on charisma or spectacle. It depends on a track record that emerges quietly but unmistakably. Authority begins with reliability. The person who keeps appointments, meets commitments, and returns to craft regardless of mood accrues trust. Trust compounds into authority because people prefer to rely on predictable competence. This pattern is not glamorous, but it is durable. Public acclaim can be purchased. Reliability cannot. Second, authority is reinforced by clarity of boundaries. People respect those who manage themselves. When you delineate what you will and will not do, you create predictable parameters around your name. Predictability breeds trust. Trust breeds influence. Authority lacks swagger. It possesses standards. Third, invisible authority is ethical authority. When your competence is joined with moral steadiness, apology when necessary, restitution when harmed, humility in success, your influence becomes a resource others seek. The quiet leader is not loudest. They are most dependable. This is attractive because it promises less theater and more deliverable outcomes. Fourth, invisible authority comes from asymmetric knowledge. Deep study and careful practice place you in a position others cannot easily copy. This knowledge is the fruit of solitude and repetition. Your strategic advantage is not secrecy per se, but the time invested where others were distracted. Fifth, authority is defensive. The person who has earned respect in private cannot be easily undermined by rumor. Their reputation was forged in the habits of craft, not in PR. When attacks come, their network of trust provides corrective testimony. This network is built from consistent small acts, helping without audience, teaching without title. Finally, invisible authority invites influence without consumption. The quiet worker can affect systems through calibrated acts. A paper, a meeting said well, a consistent training regimen. The result is a life that shifts conditions, not merely headlines. It is a moral leverage that transforms situations because the world recognizes competence when it confronts it. Earn your authority in silence. When you finally move, the field will bend because habit and integrity have prepared the ground. Failure is instructive. Public failure is punitive. There is sanctity in failing away from spectacle. When mistakes occur in the quiet of the workshop, they become raw material for refinement rather than fodder for judgment. Sacred failure is the discipline of experimenting without theatrical risk. Start by normalizing private error. Create experiments whose primary metric is learning, not image. The anxious culture treats failure as stigma. The builder treats it as data. Each error in private becomes an opportunity to test variables and correct course without the cost of reputation. Over time, this reduces the fear that ruins creativity. Second, practice safe exposure. Some failures must be staged in public. Those are calculated risks. But many necessary experiments, prototypes, rough drafts, early pitches, are better held within trusted circles. These circles function as laboratories with controlled variables, supportive, honest, and invested in your craft. This containment allows risk-taking without spectacle. Third, record and ritualize lessons. When a private experiment fails, write the mechanics down: assumptions, execution, outcome. The ritual of debriefing converts emotion into learning. It removes the shame and transmits insight into the next trial. The sacredness of the practice is not mystical. It is a hygienic method for sustainable growth. Fourth, cultivate humility. Failing privately teaches a temperament that resists arrogance and craves truth. You learn to value correction over defense. The person who has been purified by private failure responds to public challenge with curiosity rather than rage. Fifth, protect your reputation by mastering repair. Even private failures sometimes leak. When they do, the person who has practiced restitution and honest account is more likely to be forgiven. Repair is a skill. Fast admission, concrete remediation, a clear plan for prevention. Those who practice it in private are ready for public accountability. Finally, understand the paradox. The more you fail in private, the less you fear failure in public. That freedom makes you audacious where it matters. You will then take the right risks, not the performative ones. Public breakthroughs follow quiet cycles of risk, correction, and maturation. Treat your failures as sacred rehearsals. The more you fail quietly, the more your public triumphs will be unmistakable. The reveal is not the culmination. It is the translation of private craft into public consequence. A well-timed reveal reads as proof, not as plea. The difference is the work's ability to stand under scrutiny. The reveal should be choreographed with humility and strategic sense. It must carry the dignity of evidence. Begin by framing the purpose of the reveal. Are you introducing a product, a position, a new habit? Clarify the audience and the impact required. A reveal that aims merely for applause will be shallow. A reveal that aims to change attention, reorient discourse, or invite collaboration will have staying power. Second, stage quality control. Before the reveal, stress test the work in low-risk environments. Gather feedback from trusted peers who will not flatter. Remove obvious defects. The public perceives polish as care. Polish built on competence evokes authority. Third, craft a narrative of evidence. The reveal is stronger when you can present a small portfolio of demonstrations, prototypes, testimonials, recorded results. People are persuaded by patterns, not promises. Your reveal should exhibit a sequence. Here is the problem. Here is the private work. Here are measurable outcomes. Fourth, choose timing. Reveal when the market, the institution, or the community can absorb and use what you present. Sometimes the optimal moment is counterintuitive. Reveal into readiness, not into frenzy. The art of timing is the art of reading the field. Fifth, prepare to be misunderstood. Even a brilliant reveal will encounter misreading. Prepare an explanation that is calm and concise. Do not defend every critique. Answer what is substantive and let triviality pass. The reveal's solidity will do much of your defense. Finally, celebrate the reveal as beginning, not end. The stage is where testing continues. Accept that the public will refine the work in new ways you cannot foresee. Remain a learner. The reveal is courageous, but the long game after revelation is where endurance determines legacy. Reveal not to be seen, but to be useful. And let the quiet labor behind the scene convert astonishment into sustained influence. Impact can intoxicate. The applause, the metrics, the sudden doors, they are seductive. But after a well-executed reveal, the only skill that protects longevity is the discipline to return to craft. Humility after impact is not self-abnegation. It is stewardship. It recognizes that influence is borrowed and must be repaid by continued fidelity. Practice the ritual of re-entry. After a public success, schedule immediate time in the workshop not for celebration but for assessment. What worked? What surprised you? Where is the next increment? This ritual converts applause into data and prevents rest as idleness. It protects against the myth of arrival. Second, retain private habits. Public milestones will encourage social demands. Protect the routines that produce the work. The morning practice, the journaling, the hourly focus blocks. These habits are your infrastructure. Without them, impact tends toward decoration rather than construction. Third, keep receiving hard feedback. The cult of affirmation is dangerous. Invite critique from trusted peers whose role is to keep you honest. The practice of soliciting corrective input prevents complacency and sharpens the next phase of development. Fourth, Scale responsibility with care. Influence increases obligations. Accept them with prudence. Do not inflate your mission to fill the echo of applause. Instead, let the scale of your projects match your capacity, and grow capacity before you expand mission. Fifth, practice gratitude as a stabilizer. Recognize the aides, teachers, and luck that participated in your success. Gratitude anchors humility. It removes the illusion of sole authorship and prepares you to be generous in influence. Finally, hold imitation at a distance. Success creates imitators and advisors who flatter. Discernment protects you from vanity's traps. Keep your center in the practice that produced results, not in the noise that follows them. After the applause, return to the bench. Sustainable greatness is built in cycles of reveal and quiet recommitment. If the ultimate aim of building in private is anything, it is legacy. Performance seeks temporary peaks of attention. Legacy shapes the arc of influence across time. A life built in private shifts priorities from the latest metric to the next generation of useful work. Legacy is not immortal vanity. It is the diffusion of craft through time. Begin legacy thinking by orienting your work toward transmissibility. Teach what you learn. Create practices that others can adopt. The private builder who writes down methods, trains apprentices, or codifies systems ensures that the labor is not extinguished with a single lifespan. Second, measure success by depth rather than breadth. Did your work change one life in a meaningful way, or did it merely attract many superficial nods? Depth compounds. 100 deep transformations are more valuable than 1,000,000 moments of trending attention. Third, integrate moral consequence. Legacy without moral orientation can be harmful. Ask regularly, does this work contribute to human flourishing? Does it make systems fairer, relationships truer? The private life that contemplates consequence builds a legacy that matters both technically and ethically. Fourth, accept anonymity as a noble condition. Some of the most durable impacts are quiet. A method refined in an unheralded laboratory. A teacher who shaped students in private. An institution quietly reformed. Do not disdain small, invisible wins. They are the bedrock of lasting influence. Fifth, steward succession. Legacy requires planning for continuation. Name apprentices, document practices, create structures that survive the idiosyncrasy of any single person. The private life that thinks in succession resists the narcissism of momentary glory. Finally, enjoy the solitude of being a craftsman. The private laborer learns contentment in process rather than in audience. This contentment is not surrender, it is mastery. It frees you from the tyranny of constant display and allows you to take the long view. Build in private not for applause but for the work's endurance. When you live for legacy, your life becomes a quiet contribution the world cannot erase. Stay silent where it matters. Build where no one is watching. When you are ready, reveal with calm clarity, and let your work astonish the world. The person who masters this cycle lives not for performance but for consequence. They leave a presence that outlasts trends, and that is the truest measure of power.